Good afternoon, everybody. Um, yeah, and welcome to this presentation on Cyber Essentials. Without further ado, let's crack on with it. I'm from IASME. We're the delivery partner for Cyber Essentials and another of other schemes from the National Cyber Security Centre that all relate to the Cyber Essentials ecosystem. But the Cyber Essentials is owned and managed by the NCSC, National Cyber Security Centre, on behalf of the UK government. So it's a UK government scheme widely. So what is Cyber Essentials about? Cyber Essentials is about protecting organizations from commodity threats, or shall we call them common cyber threats? Okay, so these are social engineering, exploiting known vulnerabilities. These are holes in your systems, IT systems, and password guessing. Now, these are the common threats, and one of the common threats you hear about is ransomware. Ransomware is a really bad threat, but in order to carry out ransomware, you need to be using at least one of these on your screen right now, if not all three, to carry out a ransomware attack. That's why we don't say ransomware, because these are all parts of that process. These are the common cyber attacks that are run by freely available tools that are out there for people who can do pen testing. You can go the other side and do naughty things with it, let's put it that way, and exploit these vulnerabilities, etc., using freely available low skill attacks. Now the thing is, about 90% of all cyber attacks are now in this sphere of commodity threat, common cyber attacks, because nearly all cyber attacks start with a very low skill attack in the first instance. And some of these big state nation ones from China and Russia, etc., if they can find an easy way to start it, they will. So they will use these tools very quickly. And sometimes the tools are used for state actor attacks, become very widely available very quickly to the cyber criminals, and they can easily run them. And we're talking about days now, not weeks and months. They make them available within days, if not hours, to the wider communities, and make them available on the dark internet. Okay, so what are they after? Well, they're after theft of data, the encryption of data, causing general disruption. Some of it, though, some of these attacks is general curiosity and people trying to teach themselves how to carry out these attacks, because there's lots of videos and tutorials on how this all works on the internet. So this is why they become low skilled attacks, because you just don't know sometimes who's doing it. Is no real business behind it. It could be somebody in a bedroom just learning to hack. It could be a wider group. You just don't know who's behind it anymore. But what is really important to mention is that cybercrimes are the third largest economy in the world now. So it's a huge industry behind the bigger part of it, where all the innovation into the attacks takes place. There are big businesses behind this on the dark web that have their own HR departments, have their own finance teams, etc., and teams of developers developing the software, etc., to carry out hacks. So it is very mindful that is it, and it causes a lot of disruption. And the financial penalties now for getting caught out in a cyber attack is, they can be quite large. Now, there was one ransomware demand early in 2024 recorded at $70 million. That is a huge ransom to have to pay. But I would always say, and the NCSC would say, never pay the ransom. You're just fueling that industry even more. So what is Cyber Essentials itself? It is a set of technical controls that is to help prevent a cyber incident taking place. Let's take this right back to the very basics here. So if you have a laptop, or you're watching this presentation on a laptop right now, all the controls that I'm going to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so can be put in place on your laptop in front of you now you're watching this on. So these are technical controls or little configurations you can make on your devices that will prevent or inhibit a cyber attack taking place. Now, some really good stats, which I'll come on to later, but the controls of Cyber Essentials can prevent at least 80% of all cyber attacks taking place. That is based in research from Lancaster University, and recently that research was completed again, this time last year, by Bristol University, and coming up with the same figures. So it's widely, these widely recognized as being very effective at preventing the most common of cyber attacks. The controls, the technical controls I'm going to talk about, are based on a threat intelligence and risk assessment carried out by the NCSC. And there is a lot of evidence and etc. Because the scheme has been running, well, it says on this slide 10 years. Actually, it's nearly 11 years in 8 weeks' time. So it's really important, and there's lots of evidence behind this to prove that it works. That's why we're seeing great growth, and I'll show you that shortly. We've been the sole partner delivering the scheme for 5 years, but for the going all the way back to 11 years, we were involved at the outset in designing this. Our CEO was involved with working with government at the time to help develop Cyber Essentials. And it should be seen as a foundation or the first rung on the ladder of any organisation, any education establishment's cybersecurity plan to put these controls in place. So over the lifetime of the certification scheme, we've issued over 200,000 certificates in those nearly 11 years, and roughly 48,000 of those have been in the last 12 months. So there's a lot more growth in this, a lot more interest from government, such as Department of Education, because it helps to protect the UK as a whole, because cyber security isn't an individual sport, it is a team sport, and we can all improve everybody's cyber security by all adopting these controls. So just a couple of key facts and figures here. So I said we issued 200,000 certificates in the last 10-11 years. Actually, we issued the 100,000 certificate in, I believe it was July 2023. So you can see the growth here, that by December 2024 we'd issued the 200,000 certificate. So you can see on that graph that growth is just going there, because it's seen as being very effective and proving that you have good basic cybersecurity measures in place. So what is it actually? It's a certification scheme which is government backed, but it's made up of 5 technical controls that you can put in place on any device that you create. Emails, Word documents, Excel documents, run finance systems on, connect to cloud services that you should put in. Now, the controls I'm going to talk about in individual slides in a minute, they're nothing new. This has all been around for 20, 25, 30 years, etched into the lifetime of any Microsoft Windows product. They've been there in the Mac operating systems. It's just how you apply them and how effective they are when you are applying them. So the 5 controls are actually firewalls and routers, secure configuration of those devices, so that's your laptops and desktops and mobile phones and servers if you have that, maintaining good security updates in a timely fashion, access controls, this is your user and administrator accounts, how you actually log into devices and when you should log into a device with certain types of account, and malware protection. So malware protection used to be known as antivirus software, etc., but the threats have moved on from just viruses. So we have this collective term of malware, which stands for malicious software. So you want some malware protection software in place and running on your devices. So if we break them down a little bit more to just beyond the 5 and actually what they are. So you've got firewalls and routers. So the firewall and router, whether that be a physical device in your school or education establishment, or on your laptop, will have either a physical firewall, that's a box where you have the internet connection plugged into it and it offers you a layer of protection. But if you have standalone machines and laptops like in your home environment, they will have a built-in firewall as well in the software form, built into the operating system. So that should be Windows 10, Windows 11, any of the Mac operating systems will have a firewall in there. And these give you that first barrier between the threats that we're trying to protect from. So the threats in Cyber Essentials we're trying to protect come from the internet, and gives you that first layer of protection between your device and the internet. Is having this firewall in place. And in that firewall, you can have open doors. They're called ports. And those ports, if you're not needing them, can be used to attack against your machine and get into your machines or servers or into your networks when it's a physical firewall protecting your network. And the attacker will see that as an open door to give them entry into your networks and devices. And what we say in Cyber Essentials is close all your ports. All inbound ports be closed by default. Now, there are times when you need some of those ports open, but all we say is have them documented, because you know that they are open to carry out a service or allow inbound access to a system you may have on site, but you need to have them documented and review them on a regular basis, because when you don't need them, make sure they get closed. That's the most important thing. All controls need to be applied to the physical and software firewalls on the boundary of the internet. So that could be, as I say, on your laptops and desktops. They all need to have these controls applied. Secure configuration is about how the operating systems and the services you have are configured. So if you have a piece of software that is on your laptop that you never use, you're unlikely to ever use it, but you're also unlikely to ever run updates against it because you may not have auto updates turned onto it. The best thing to do if you're not using that software is remove it. It reduces the attack surface. So if there's a vulnerability in that piece of software and you have it installed but you haven't patched or updated that piece of software, that is also another entry point for the attacker to and carry out a cyber attack against you and get remote access to your systems. If that piece of software is actually uninstalled, it reduces it, that vulnerability that may have been associated with that piece of software cannot be exploited if the software has been removed. This is the same with user accounts. So sometimes you have default accounts on services that you never use because you issue people their own account to access. Default accounts should be removed if they're not used or disabled. Again, if an attacker can get hold of a default account with a standard password that is available on the internet for your firewall or built into the operating system, they can use that again to get remote access or run a cyber attack against you. If they're disabled or removed, that's just made the attack surface a bit smaller and something else they cannot exploit to carry out the attack by removing them. We want you to set an access PIN or password to unlock your devices. This is particularly relevant to mobile phones, smartphones and tablets, because most operating systems now require you to have a login to open up in Windows 10, Windows 11 and Mac, etc. But they will lock after a period of time. You also want to disable autoplay or auto run. So this stops, say you plug in a USB pen, even though the USB pen is not part of Cyber Essentials, it doesn't come under it. If you plug one in and something tries to run, the operating system will stop it from running because it's been told not to allow it to run automatically. So we want people to make sure those settings are in, because sometimes those, when you download something from the internet or you plug something in, it tries to run automatically. You may not know what it is. I've seen an example of this many years ago where I saw a USB Christmas tree with little lights, very innocuous, from a pound shop, plugged into a laptop one day and think, oh, that's very twee for Christmas as a Christmas decoration. And actually, if you slowed the process down, a nice little black screen flashed on and off on your laptop or desktop, and that screen, when slowed down, ran a program. And that program was what's called a keylogger. So everything you typed on your keyboard while that USB device was connected to your laptop was sending all the keystrokes, all your passwords and everything you were typing out back to an IP address or a server or, you know, an internet connection located in China. So if they'd have disabled the autoplay, auto run at the time, that piece of software couldn't have done that and it would have blocked it running. So that's what we're trying to do there by disabling those. With the setup compliant authentication on your service exposed to the internet, slightly more complicated, but we have set ways that we want you to use to log in to your services in Cyber Essentials. If you have something that you want people to log into that's located on a system in your school or college, etc., you want to make sure you have what we call authentication set up to the standard prescribed in Cyber Essentials. So that is to use a username and password of a certain length depending on what extra control you have alongside it. So if you have multi-factor authentication, which is sometimes also referred to as MFA or 2SV or two-factor authentication, and you have a password with it running alongside it, it could be 8 characters with your username. But if you have no multi-factor running, you need to have at least a 12-character password. And what we're saying, any of those services that you have open to the internet, right, they need to be authenticated. You can't just allow random access in without it, but you need to use the systems, the login measures that we outline in Cyber Essentials to log in securely to those systems. Okay, so security update management is the third control. This is your patches and updates that you will see on your laptops and desktops where it needs a restart. Now, many update packages and patches nowadays are to address security holes that are found in your software and your operating systems. And in order to keep receiving these very important updates, you must be using a supported operating system on your devices, and the software you're using is supported. You need to turn on automatic updates and on your devices where available and when you can fit it in. When you have the element of control around it, you need to put those on. But if you can't, and you have to do a specific patching regime where you need to do what we call manual updates, that's also allowable, but it must all have their high and critical risk updates installed with 14 days of release. This is a difficult thing for some organizations to get used to because there are different patching regimes and update regimes out there that may be talked about that are longer than 14 days. But the 14 days is very important because the time it takes to exploit what these updates are trying to stop, okay, is that access or whatever an attacker getting to you is getting closer and closer to 14 days, if not less, before they are out there and being used to attack you. So for an example, Microsoft in one of their operating systems several years ago published lots of updates about it and said publicly, yes, we'll release updates for these exploits and these vulnerabilities. Here are the new patches and the updates. Well, the attackers were also being told that this hole in the software was also there, and the attackers started to exploit it very quickly. In fact, quicker than they released the patch. They made everybody aware that there was this vulnerability and were going to release a patch. They released it 3 or 4 days later. The attackers were already using it to carry out cyber attacks. So it's really important, even though 14 days seems a really short period of time to apply these patches in, the sooner you can get on your systems and apply these updates, or vulnerability fixes as we now call them, as quickly as possible on your systems to stop the chance of a cyber attack taking place. User access control, as I said earlier, is about user accounts for day-to-day activities, etc. So this is Excel, doing email, doing business documentation, creating PowerPoints, lesson plans, etc., etc. Always do it with a standard user account that doesn't allow you to install software and make configuration changes. They're called administrative accounts. Administrative accounts are very powerful if it get into the hands of your cyber criminal. Okay, that is exactly what they're after. If you can give them an administrative account and access to it for free because you haven't separated your accounts, that gives them the keys to the kingdom. They can do whatever they like. They can create new accounts and use those to carry out attacks. They can run malicious software, etc. That's the kind of thing they can do with it. They could end up deleting files or encrypting files as well with using an administrative account. We don't want these accounts to be shared between people. We want to make sure each individual user is issued with a standard user account, and if they do required as their job role to carry out administrative duties on those systems, to have a separate administrator account and not have those privileges on the standard user account. But where possible with all these accounts, and this is especially to cloud services such as Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, which is very much used by nearly all organizations nowadays, a wide range of cloud services, please use multi-factor authentication as well as a username and password to access these types of accounts and those cloud services you use to carry out day-to-day work. Okay, by using a standard user account, you are applying the principle of least privilege, so they have the absolute bare minimum amount of privileges on their account to carry out their day-to-day job. We don't want them having extra privileges that allows them to run software or create user accounts, etc. on that standard user account. Just keep it separate. When you do need to run a piece of software or install it, you're hoping it's going to chuck up another box and ask you for a second set of account details that's different to your standard login. That means you've got a separated account, which means that one is used to carry out the software install or create a user account, etc., or make a configuration change to your device. Just keeping those two separate can stop an attack taking place, perhaps when you possibly click on a hyperlink in an email that takes through that's trying to run a ransomware. It could stop that ransomware happening because your account doesn't have the privileges to install the encryption software. So it's highly important to have these two accounts separated, and the duties that those two accounts can carry out, keep them separated as well. Finally, malware protection. This is the easiest one to get your head around, really. This is your antivirus software and your malware protection software, often built into operating systems. Make sure it's installed correctly, kept up to date, and configured to the vendor's best practice guidelines. It's really important. It's very rare now that you don't have malware protection on operating systems, because most operating systems now have an element of this installed for free and as part of the operating system. When you're on mobile devices and tablets, there isn't quite the same level of protection with malware protection that is compatible for compliance with Cyber Essentials. So what we do ask for is a list of approved software, so you know what software is actually attaching to your organization's data and services That also means you keep tabs of those approved software and make sure they are updated on a regular basis. Okay, so they're the 5 controls. Okay, Cyber Essentials. Now, one of the hardest elements of Cyber Essentials is the first part of Cyber Essentials is setting the scope of the certification. Now, in Cyber Essentials, because it's very practical and technical, this is about the protections you put on your devices. So that could be here, a large list here: smartphones, tablets, the routers, the firewalls, your desktops, laptops, thin clients and servers. So you want to put controls around them. That's how the settings you get to make them work. So you need to have some form of asset management in place to understand where you put the controls. Now, the boundaries of where your scope are set by your boundary with the internet, and you may have internal boundaries because you may need to use unsupported software in your organization. And when you do that, you want to keep it out of the scope of Cyber Essentials with an extra layer of protection by a second firewall. You don't want those unsupported devices and software exposed to the internet because they're more vulnerable now they're unsupported. But everything you want in scope of Cyber Essentials needs to be supported. And then in the case of a school, in your first part of your journey, I would highly suggest this is the business operations network of the school. Okay, all the controls that I am talking about and the scope here and the devices are in any organization in the UK can apply these controls. But in schools, you have different setups. You maybe have a student network. You may be having a guest network for other people who come in. You might have a classroom network. You might have a central business operations network. By using this thing called segments and splitting it up, it gives you layers of protection. But those that are in those network segments that are in scope, and you need to have in scope for funding, etc., and that's what they're looking for on the certificate, everything must be supported. But these are the things you can apply them to: desktops, laptops, servers, mobile phones, tablets, routers, firewalls. These are the devices we're interested in being in scope. And if you work with Qlic IT, they will, help you manage these, and they will talk to you about when they become unsupported, etc. Because unsupported devices present a great risk to your organization. So why? Now, this is the really important bit for me, is resilience against online threats. Cyber Essentials has been proven to be highly effective against preventing common cyber attacks. As I mentioned earlier, 80% of all common cyber attacks can be prevented by applying the 5 control sets outlined in Cyber Essentials. It provides funding opportunities. Now, if any of you are members of the RPA, etc., and funding for various projects within the education sector, they are looking for Cyber Essentials as a level of protection and demonstrate that protection within your organizations. The other area that's really important is about UK data protection regulations as well. When the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, investigate data breaches, one of the first areas they start looking at now is, have you got a Cyber Essentials certificate? Have you applied the controls? If you're working in certain sectors, have you got Cyber Essentials plus the audited version of Cyber Essentials? There was quite a large cyber attack against an organization that was providing software to a particular sector that had a fine issued the other week because they weren't fully applying all the controls of Cyber Essentials. In fact, it was only 5% of their organization and the services they were giving. They weren't applying Cyber Essentials. But in a step by the ICO, they've made a bit of an example of them, and they fined them £3 million for not applying MFA on their software solution. That's a big step forward, but it just also shows that the ICO are looking at Cyber Essentials and they understand the level of protection it gives to get protecting from cyber attacks, and that there are things, and what I've explained to you in the controls are simple to apply. Maybe not more, they're not so simple as the scale of your organization goes up, but they are simple as when you look at it per device to put in and apply. It's really important though that they'll apply these controls because of these various opportunities it presents to you, but also to meet the UK data protection regulations. So there are two parts to Cyber Essentials. The first part is a verified self-assessment. Okay, and it's you fill out a questionnaire about your IT services you have and how you have applied the controls I've outlined. Okay, that is freely available from the IASME website. You can click through to it from the NCSE site as well, and it'll just come through to our website. But you can freely download the question set and have a go yourself and see where you are at the current time. The Cyber Essentials Plus is once you've completed the self-assessment and it's been passed by one of the nearly 1,000 assessors we have. Okay, you can go on to CE Plus. This is an audited version where the assessor will log into you or come to site and run a series of tests against your network and devices to check that you have actually put those controls in place and they are configured correctly. We have a lot of organizations now moving on to Cyber Essentials Plus because it gives an extra level of assurance to the people who are funding them. We've seen enormous growth in this. The monthly figures on Cyber Essentials Plus has doubled in nearly the last 2 years because they're asking for that extra level of assurance. But it's also a great exercise for the certified organization to go through, because they can look at the outcomes of those tests and it will maybe highlight that you are not patching correctly, but you're given a period of time to fix those anomalies that turn up in the tests. But we find, and when speaking to organizations that done it, they find that process really useful to understand, and it actually makes them realize they weren't quite protected in the same way, but by the end of the process they will have that level of protection in place. All details of both of these schemes are widely available, and they are, if you want the de facto position on this, it's on the IASME website. Okay, so the impact to Cyber Essentials, there was lots of evaluations on this over the last year, and I think this is where it gets really important. Some of these figures are really, really good. So if you have cyber insurance, and this is, especially a member of the LPA, you need to have some form of cyber insurance, and I believe they offer it as part of their sign up. It is 92% less likely to make a claim on that cyber insurance if you've applied the controls of Cyber Essentials. That's an incredible stat, I think. It really is. It shows you how much better off you are by having the controls in place. We actually have an organization that asked its 3,000 partner companies to obtain Cyber Essentials. In fact, they went to Cyber Essentials Plus, the audited version. And in the 3 years that they've asked their whole 3,000 financial advisors to apply the controls of Cyber Essentials, they have seen an 85% reduction in cyber incidents in that period of time. That's an astonishing figure. So through the impact of having Cyber Essentials, it's increased market competitiveness. That gives the Department of Education, it gives you competitiveness within them and understanding that you're taking this seriously. Unfortunately, education does get a lot of cyber attacks. Okay, through whatever means, whether I don't know whether it's the cyber attackers see them as easy targets or whatever, but you can really help and reduce by applying these controls of Cyber Essentials. And also it will give your board of governors, etc., so much better understanding of the cyber security risks by applying Cyber Essentials throughout your education establishment. So where can you get help? Well, there are lots of places you can get help with Cyber Essentials now. Okay, that's by becoming and speaking to our cyber advisors. I'm talking to Qlic IT about this and hoping that one day they will become, or very soon, become one of our assured service providers for the cyber advisor scheme to back up the excellent work they already do. Okay, as you can see, we currently have, I think it's actually about 110 advisors now and 104 assured service providers. But the advisors are really skilled in how to configure your systems and understand the technical controls in full and can give you top quality advice on how to apply within your organizations. There's plenty of information on the IASME website and also the NCSE website about this. We have a readiness tool which gives you a gap analysis tool which you can use for free, available from IASME again, that can assess briefly whether you're ready to take and carry out the Cyber Essentials assessment, and it will show you what areas you need to improve before you carry out the assessment. And this is a free piece of, a free resource for all involved with Cyber Essentials. That's assessors as well. It's called the Cyber Essentials Knowledge Hub. It has all the latest up-to-date information of how the scheme should be applied and lots of information about end of life of operating systems and devices, etc. And with the timelines that we accept for Cyber Essentials. So there's lots of advice about the 5 controls, which I've talked about today, and about operating system support. Lots of things about scheme advisories. These are the latest updates of Cyber Essentials. This is a new part of the Knowledge Hub, which we'll be updating on a regular basis. Lots about scope, I've mentioned it today, but most importantly for you guys is we have a whole section on how to apply Cyber Essentials in schools and colleges. We have a huge section here, a number of guidance articles, what questions to ask of your IT services and MSP organisations, and all in a language you understand and how it will work for your board of governors, etc., and the questions they should be asking. So there's a whole section in there because this guidance came from working on a large project with the Department of Education. And finally, there's our certification bodies and our 1,000 assessors we've got. So we currently got 360 certifying bodies or certification bodies. I actually think it's now closer to 400 the last time I looked here at the start of this week. And we have nearly 1,000 Cyber Essentials assessors. So there's lots of experts in Cyber Essentials out there to help your organisations. This is my final technical slide, and I'm sure Qlic IT will back me up on this one. Everybody needs to know that Windows 10 will be end of life in just over 6 months time. Windows 10 will no longer receive any security updates unless you pay Microsoft additional fees. Okay, this is really important because Windows 10, when it goes end of life, immediately the hackers will be seeing an opportunity to try and exploit vulnerabilities that are in Windows 10 after this date. There are also other Microsoft products also going end of life. So if you run an in-house Exchange server, you'll need to remove that and change to an alternative system. And Office products such as 2016 and 2019 also go end of life on that date. In fact, Office will virtually be only available through Microsoft Office, the subscription service that we all know called Office 365 or MS 365 from that date. Microsoft are having a big change to being a cloud services only company, and it's important to understand if you're using Microsoft products that you need to go and check out their list. Now, that's where I'll point you to our Knowledge Hub, where we have done an article on this and we have talked about all this long list of Microsoft products that are going end of life this year. So it's important to check that out. So in summary, Cyber Essentials is your foundation to your cybersecurity plan. Okay, it is really effective. We have that evidence. It's there. I'll give you some of the stats today. So as few small technical changes can prevent 80% of common cyber attacks. We won't talk about the next one because your supply chains, that'll be the Department of Education coming to the schools. But that is why the Department of Education will be asking you more and more to have cyber essentials, because you're part of the education sector's supply chain. But there's loads of help out there from IASME, from bodies such as Qlic IT, etc., that can advise you on cyber essentials. There's loads of free resources out there, and the resources that I'm involved with and my team here at IASME, we are working on updates every day of the week to make sure we can provide you with the best correct information on how to apply, use the controls to the latest technology that comes along.
Well, thank you very much for joining everybody this afternoon. Hopefully that was good, and we'll see you soon.